Hello, friends! Today we will analyze the game between Robert Fischer and Mikhail Tal from the famous Candidates Tournament of 1959. So, young Bobby opens the game with the king's pawn, and Tal responds with the sharp Sicilian defense. White develops the knight, and black takes control of the central squares. Fischer occupies the center with his pawns. An exchange occurs on the d4 square, followed by an attack on the pawn at e4. Fischer defends his pawn with the knight while developing at the same time. The future 8th world champion plays the Najdorf variation, while the future 11th applies his favorite continuation, bishop to c4, against the Sicilian setup. Well, Mikhail Tal builds his own hedgehog fortress to counter Fischer's powerful setup. Fischer makes a prophylactic move, bishop to b3, in order not to fall under the tempo push of the b-pawn. In any case, Tal launches his pawn with the idea to go b4 and bite the central pawn, and Fischer, as if nothing happened, plays f4 with the idea to start an offensive in the center and on the king side. Thus, white is confident in the attack on the enemy king, while black believes that he will be able to capture the central pawn without punishment. In his book My Great Predecessors, Garry Kasparov wrote the following. On the morning of the day of this game, Tal analyzed this variation with Averbach, Koblenz, and Petrosian, who had called in. Tigran liked the move knight to e4. Such a nice little central pawn. I think I would take it. But Mikhail had his doubts, and it was only after sitting at the board and glancing at Fischer that he mentally waved his hand. Ah, what the devil. I'll take it. The opponents seemed to have changed roles. Usually, Tal preferred to sacrifice and attack the enemy king. But in this situation, it was Fischer who had to sacrifice. The move f5 was threatening, destroying the cover of the enemy king. The computer recommends the move knight to f6, but Tal plays in a human way, g6, supposedly preventing the move f5. In spite of this, Bobby thrusts his pawn forward on f5. It turns out that taking with the king's pawn is bad, because white attacks the rook. After the retreat, white breaks through on the f5 square and delivers a double attack, winning material. In the end, an exchange. Therefore, in the game, Mikhail Tal captures on the f5 square with the g-pawn, but allows a strike with an iron hoof. And again, taking with the king's pawn is impossible, because of the move queen to d5, then delivers a double attack, and also wins an exchange. So, in the game, Mikhail Tal immediately moves the rook to the g8 square, at the same time secretly watching the king. And Fischer puts his bishop under attack, striking both the rook and the knight on e4. However, capturing this bishop is impossible, because of the blow on the d5 square with the queen. In case of taking, white renews the mating threat. The knight is hanging, the rook is hanging. After the rook steps back, white captures on e4, regains the piece, collects a pawn, and obtains an attack against the unprotected black monarch. Taking this into account, in our game, Mikhail Tal does not capture the bishop on the d5 square, but instead removes his rook from attack. White takes on e4, black strikes on f5. After a couple of inaccuracies, I felt I was walking on the edge of the abyss, and Fischer was playing with fierce concentration. Still, he rushed to restore material balance, and with that, he let part of his advantage slip away, wrote Mikhail Tal in his commentary. And indeed, Robert only needed to retreat to the f3 square. Black's king was exposed, surrounded by an entire army of cripples. But in our game, Fischer captured the pawn on f5, and Tal made an excellent defensive move, rook to e7, covering his king. Fischer exchanged on c8, and here it was necessary to defend the weak pawn with the move rook to f2. Instead, Robert played bishop to f4. Mikhail Tal delivered a double attack, striking the knight and at the same time creating a mating threat. White defended with the queen, and black captured on a4. As it later turned out, the American Grandmaster had not even seriously considered this capture, believing that the black king would not escape unpunished. He struck on the d6 square. Black returned the queen to c6, attacking the bishop, and at the same time offering the exchange of the strongest pieces. Clearly, capturing the rook on e7 was not good, since black would exchange, then capture on e7 and get two pieces for a rook. Therefore, in the game, young Robert captured the knight on b8. Tal gave a check and took the bishop. In this position, the right move was rook to e1, creating a diagonal check threat. White would have had decent compensation for the lost piece, but unfortunately for him, the American did not play rook to e1. Mikhail Tal said, "In our game, Fischer first wrote down the move e1, without a doubt the strongest, and he wrote it not in his usual English notation, but in European, almost Russian. Then, not very deftly, he pushed the score sheet towards me. I got up and calmly walked about. When I returned, he crossed out the move and played c6. When I later asked Fischer why he had not played e1, he replied, 'Well, you laughed when I wrote it down.'" Tal blocked the check with the rook. After rook to e1, black interposed with the bishop. White captured on f7, distracting the rook from d7. After the recapture, he gave a check from e6. Moving to e8 was impossible because of checkmate in 1, so the king had to retreat to f8. White recaptured the rook on d7. Let us note for the record that the check from f1 would have given nothing, since the king calmly escaped into the corner, and White's first rank was weak. After the continuation in the actual game, the capture on d7, Tal offered a queen exchange and defended his bishop. White avoided this exchange. Black consolidated his position, and White replied with c3, black protecting the pawn on b4. Then followed queen to c8. The king ran to g7. White played queen to c4. Tal moved his bishop back to d8 so that it would not hang. White exchanged on b4 and pushed the g-pawn forward. But now Mikhail Tal trapped the enemy queen into an exchange. The attack was repelled, and the process of converting the material advantage began. Fischer defended his queen. An exchange occurred on the c4 square. Black protected the pawn on b4. The kings moved toward the center of the board. After all, we had reached the endgame. Black gave a check, and after the king stepped back, attacked the rook. Robert defended the rook with the king. Tal attacked the pawn on b2. The rook returned to c2. After bishop to e5 and rook to e2, Mikhail Tal transferred his rook to the open file. Gradually, the black pieces infiltrated deep into the opponent's camp. White was forced to stand still, while black kept advancing. A check threatened, followed by rook to f2 and the exchange of heavy pieces. The American Grandmaster, of course, tried to trade the remaining pawns in order to reach a draw. But Tal avoided this proposal. The white position was completely hopeless. If, for example, rook to d2, then black gives one check, another, exchanges the rooks, captures the pawn on b2, and wins easily. And the continuation in the game, rook to c8, was no better. Tal captured the pawn. Fischer gave a check. After the retreat, he attacked the pawn on b3. Black defended along the third rank. It might have seemed that white was about to win the pawn back, but not this time. Black gave a check. After the king's retreat, he attacked the rook, and after rook to b5, the way for the passed pawn was opened. There followed a4, but after the reply b2, on the 52nd move, Robert Fischer resigned. Thus, Mikhail Tal scored his fourth victory over Robert Fischer in this candidates tournament, bringing the head-to-head score to a crushing result. And to conclude the review, I would like to ask you to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you wish to support it, the links are in the description. See you next time.